Victor, look,
Yes.
I don't get this thing. This thing doesn't make sense to me. And here's why. It's pussy. It's all about pussy. Because you can get all that other stuff.
Right.
You can your Farmville can be going crazy. I don't know if that's probably dated at this point. You know, your social your internet life can be killing it, but you're not getting any pussy. But that's what a car allows you to do. A car allows you to go get the girl and then take her to a third location where you can fuck her when you're still 16 years old. So I love that. I heard them in there kind of laughing. They were like, you know, these people who are 50 or 60 years old now, I remember when they were 16, they were there the day they turned. It wasn't that long ago. That seems really...
I'm the closest one of us to that age, and I remember... I turned 16 on a Sunday, and I was so bummed because I couldn't go get it.
Yeah.
And then that Monday, I skipped school so I could get my license immediately. Like, it wasn't something of, like, fucking Square driving around, you know? Like,
I hate when
you needed that to be social.
I hate when people use that technique. There's this ad that plays on the Sirius XM on the Stern Show, and it goes like this. The guy says, hey, remember back in the day when you had to wash things by hand, like dishes or your clothes? Now, that's really going back, right? Like, dishes washing by hand would probably go back to, like early 90s or 80s. But washing clothes by hand...
No, dishes washing by hand is before my lifetime.
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
So, but washing your clothes by hand, that's going back to the wash tub days.
It's like
he follows that
settlers.
up with...
Native American Indians were doing that.
So then he chuckles. He says, remember when you're washing things by hand, like your dishes or your clothes? Or how about this one? Remember when you had to wash your mini CPAP machine by hand? Well, no longer. It's like, wait a minute. Are you comparing washing your CPAP machine, which is that thing that keeps you from snoring at night, with which is a sort of a new thing? Like it's an electronic device. Let's just leave it at that. He's comparing washing that by hand with washing your clothes by hand, and that just pisses me off. I feel like it's so insulting.
Trying to scrub the smallpox out of your blankets?
Thank you. It's so insulting to my intelligence that I immediately turned that one off, and I hate it. I hate that ad. And this struck me the same way. They're like, 50 years ago when you were 16, you really wanted that car, but no longer. I feel like maybe in like really urban areas, I bet in New York and LA, sure, you turn 16, you're like, what's the big rush? Like the cost of even owning a car in those places is very prohibitive. Where are you going to park that thing in New York? You're going to be paying for a parking garage when you're 16? It doesn't work. So I get it
New
there.
York, that's one
you get really
area,
urban,
a relatively tiny
adults,
area.
You get urban enough.
Sure, totally. Yeah, but like where I am, like if you don't have a car, like 15-year-old version of me, if I rode my bike for like a couple of miles, I could get to a gas station. But it's going to take a while. And these aren't roads that are meant for bicycles. Some of them are fucking dirt roads along the way. It's a mess. You're going to get hit by a car. There's no sidewalks.
It's like the white line that indicates the shoulder. There's only like 5 inches to the right of that.
We don't have a white line on the line where I grew on the road where I grew up. There's no white line. It's not a place to be riding your bike and going places. But when I turned 16 and got a car, suddenly my mobility went from literally a couple hundred yards to a couple hundred miles. You know what I mean? It was life changing. So sure, if you live in a super urban area where you've got all that public transportation and Uber and Lyft and all that stuff is an option. I saw somebody doing that the other day. We were at a paintball field in Atlanta, and somebody had gotten one of those. I think it was Lyft. I think is that the car? No, it wasn't Lyft. It was the one where you can go rent.
Zip.
Yeah, it was a Zip car where you go like rent the car for a couple hours or something, basically, I suppose. And they had one of those. And that makes sense, I guess, if you aren't going to need to go anywhere very often.
If you don't use cars all the time, Zip makes sense.
It was so great when I had that car. And I was like, anytime you can't, you've been studying for 2 or 3 hours and you just want to like decompress, but you do still live in a house with your mother, your father, and a sibling or two. Like that can be hard to achieve, but you can hop right in your car. You can drive down to the lake or wherever. It's just a life-altering experience, and I feel like they're making too much of some statistics that say
I
that
hardly even trust the premise of this. Everyone I
more
knew
likely
got their
that they
license
can't
quickly.
afford the car than that. It's more likely that this age group can't afford a car right now than it is that they don't want.
I think that I don't disagree with what you said, but I think the fact that you can have a social life online is a contributing factor. I think you're not, taking away the internet now, and this isn't just for kids, me too, is a serious punishment. If I didn't have my internet to talk to my friends and in my case professionally as well, But it would be a big loss. I would really hate that. But you can stay connected to the world through the internet, and I can see why, at least in some ways, it doesn't get you laid, but it satisfies that social.
To be social.
Yeah, perfect.
It's more of a guy thing than a girl thing too. I think that guys really want a car more than girls necessarily do, because as a girl, I think it's always easy to get a ride. There's always somebody who is happy to allow you into their vehicle if you're a 16-year-old girl. I guarantee it.
If you're pretty.
But as a 16-year-old guy, the options aren't as available, and definitely not to the point where, like, I feel like a 16-year-old girl could be like, "Hey, I'd like to go to the mall today," and there's a whole pile of guys who'd be like, "Let's go," they'll just fucking take your ass. But if you're a dude and you're on your own, and achieving independence is a driver's license. That's what it was all about.
Yeah, I mean, like, one of my friends waited until he was 17 in a couple months to get his license, and all we did was rip on him and give him shit for it.
Yeah.
Where it was like, "Hey, you gonna meet us over at Rob's?" Oh no, you're not, because you can't drive.
Yeah, I had a friend,
and I'm not gonna come pick you up because you're not a chick. Like,
I had a friend who literally could not pass the test, and we were all like, we thought Nick was, a reasonably bright fellow, but he can't pass a driver's test. And it was a real stigma, and it still is as far as I'm concerned. I saw that motherfucker working at AutoZone the other day, and the first thing that popped in my head was, I wonder if they just award you a driver's license when you turn 25. Like, because I know this motherfucker didn't pass it. He can't even get my oil filter right. I feel bad. He was the only one. It was him and the people who had, like, disabilities and stuff, that didn't have.
I didn't get my license on my birthday. I desperately wanted it, and I drove illegally well before my birthday consistently. But it was tricky. It had something to do with, like, the school didn't have me take. You had to have the written exam. You could only get the written test until at 17. So in Jersey, it's 17. Most places, it's 15. But you could get it at, like, 16 and a half if you took it at school. So they would, like, replace one of your gym classes with driver's ed. But you had to have the license for, like, 6 months. So the way that mine was scheduled, I didn't, like, I got it 6 months after that, but I turned out I was like 17 in a month or something.
I had a driver's, and there was no driver's ed at my school. Mm-hmm. And so you had to do driver's ed either not at all and just ride around with your parents for the required amount of hours, which nobody ever did. The parents just signed it to get them out of your hair. Or you had to get an independent driver's ed instructor. And that's what my parents did for me. And they were like, all right, you're going to have this guy. He's going to pull up in his weird little car where you get in, and he still has, like, pedals and a mini steering wheel on his side in case you fuck up too bad.
Thank God.
And I get in with this guy on the first time, and, like, 20 minutes into our trip of driving around, where he told my parents, he's like, yeah, he's going to do fine. I'll take him out there. I do this all the time. He's good. We'll be back in, like, 2.5 hours. I was like, okay, well, that's way too long. That sucks. But just drove around with him, and, like, 20 minutes into it, I realized that we were just going on a list of errands for him as he was teaching me to drive. He was just like, are you going to take a left here and just pull right into the CVS drive-through? Exactly.
Yeah.
Will you put this in the tube? And it's like, are you shitting me, dude? Like, my parents are paying you to teach me to drive, and I'm filling your goddamn heartburn medication.
I had the same experience. Yeah, absolutely.
You did the same thing with the...
Yeah, errands. So this guy worked for the school. He was the baseball coach / driver's ed. And so
don't you love those high school slashes?
Yeah.
History teacher / wrestling coach.
We had that. Yeah, that was a regular thing. All and I guess social studies is the easy one to either get accredited for or to teach. I don't know, but they always went for that usually if they were going to have to teach a subject. But this guy was boys baseball / driver's ed. And we would be driving along and be like, all right, just make a left into here. And all right, now I'm going to back into that parking space right there next to the door. All right, I'm going to go in here and get some biscuits. What do y'all want? And it was like, sausage? And he'd come out with biscuits for everybody and be like, all right, now we're going to go check my mail. I should have ran by now. Let's go by my house. And we did shit like that. We'd pay bills. We'd drive around and pick supplies up for, like, the baseball team. Sometimes he'd drive, and literally it was a trip to go somewhere and get some baseball shit for the team.
My high school had a couple of those cars where the passenger had the pedals and everything. Yeah. And
Dodge Intrepid.
I don't remember. Ford Taurus maybe. But anyway, yeah, he took us around. We didn't do errands or anything. He was the gym teacher, and he did that too. But I couldn't speed you get in trouble for speeding, right? And the speed limit was 25. So I would like floor it. It'd be like, wah! Ooh. Right, I get right to 25 because that was more interesting for me. And he's like, boy, you got a lead foot. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And he's like, that's not a compliment. But I took it as one for sure. I was like, yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty cool. It's like,
It was an auto, so it took no talent to just press the pedal down until 25. But, yeah. And I thought I had him on a technicality. Like, well, I'm not speeding. Oh, the typical, dumbass teenager who thinks he outsmarted someone.
My guy gave me some lip one of the first days because I had the audacity to try to go right on red because I felt like I was prepared for that at this point where it's like, all right, I'm going to pull up and I'm going to go right on a red like you do. And as I was just trying to like inch forward like through the crosswalk and take the right turn, I was going to be fine. He just slams on his side of the brake, but I'm still kind of accelerating slowly. And so it's like a weird like leaning forward on his front wheels of like on this old Honda Accord. And he's like, what do you think you're doing? This is old black guy. And I was like, I'm trying to go right on red. It says that I can do that. And he's like, nah, you are not ready for that. Like it was some like insurmountable thing of like, all right, a couple more sessions, then we'll be going right on red.
That's an advanced technique.
Mm-hmm.
I had the worst situation with driver's ed. So I don't remember exactly what happened. I know it was the first period of the day. Like it was the first class of the day because that's why I was in driver's ed when I learned about 9/11. But it was a scenario where I remember I was definitely asleep when we picked partners. That definitely happened. But there was also something else where like I didn't get in with my friends. Like we had all said we were going to take driver's ed together, but something happened and I didn't make it in. Long story short, my partners were, and you know, I'm 15, of course, which is the proper age to be taking this. My partners are a 16-year-old mentally disabled girl and an 18-year-old senior who also doesn't have his driver's license and is all fucked up. He's just got a litany of issues. He's just peculiar, just an odd guy. So I've been driving for a while now as a 15-year-old. Like I was always driving for years. You know, even when I was like 10, I'd sit on my dad's lap and he'd let me, you know, turn the wheel and we'd drive around town and stuff like that. So I got this shit down. So when it comes to like, all right, put it in reverse and try to back up, I got that. Like I figured that one out. I'm a master of reverse at this point. Ronald's never done reverse before. Ronald nearly kills us just doing reverse. We got to this intersection once where like the road diverged. It literally did this, and in the middle is a giant tree. He couldn't decide. He just went, ah! And like he was headed straight for the tree going like 30, 35 miles an hour. And the teacher has to hit that emergency brake over there. And I remember like I didn't have my seatbelt on and it throws me into the front seat. So like I'm like up between the two of them and I'm like, what the shit was that? What was that? And he's just like, I didn't know left or right. And he's like, left. Why would you go right? That's a parking lot. It's a parking lot. But he was completely unprepared for that. Driver's ed was a terrible time. That was one of my least favorite classes.
Dude, that was the class that I took most seriously. I was failing like everything my junior year. I was shit.
Not driver's ed.
98.6 in driver's ed. You know, that was my strongest course.
Do you guys remember what you got on the driving test?
Yeah, that was it.
98. Wait, on the. So is driver's ed is that a school? You can get your license through that. You don't have to go to like an office. Like a DMV?
So what it was is there were two options to get your learner's permit. You could take this like 25 question test at the DMV, but you had to be 17. Or you could take this like 125 question test through the school at 16 and a half. And if you took driver's ed at school, like this is like the written portion.
That's weird. I didn't know Jersey was different.
Your final exam, they make you a little older. It makes sense though. But your final exam is the like state issued test. I think that was the only grade in the whole thing. You know, everyone did well, typically.
I failed my permit test when I first went in, where you don't do any driving at all. It's just like 25 questions, and it said there like you need to know all the road signs. And I was like 15, obviously, and so I was like, I got it. Like they're gonna show a picture of one that says stop, and I'll go, oh, that one says stop. I can tell because I can read it. And then they threw me for a curve when they started showing all the signs and just the geometric shapes, like all in gray. So it wasn't like even red or orange or yellow. It was just like, well, fuck. Now, what's that trapezoid mean? Is there a railroad? I don't know.
Children at play?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, what is a yellow triangle? And I think that's children at play. And a red one would be yield. You know, like a red and white one. And but they'll give you the signs with no words on them, and you're supposed to know them by that. In Jersey, there were a couple things that you might not know, like how many points do you get for passing a school bus? You know, like how many points is the tickets?
3.
It's 5, I think. And
5.
Yeah, it's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, I did that once.
Jersey's hard to drive in. Jersey, not only is there winter weather, which is tough, but the road systems are pretty bad. I think that's tied into the winter weather. There's just more potholes, and also it's a really old state. Like it's been, I want to be like it's been densely populated for a long time. So there's all kinds of, you know how you guys have been, or I know Kyle anyways, been to Boston, maybe Taylor too. Yeah, Taylor's. I was there with you. Like all the roads, they're not like just great grids that make sense and everything's laid out right. It's all like
hectic
spaghetti.
Some guy in a like stagecoach first carved out this path, and it's just been paved since then. It's a wreck. Jersey's got a lot of stuff that kind of doesn't make sense. You know, it wasn't planned out by some city planner. It just evolved that way. I think it's a hard place to drive. I think it's hard. They'll expand the road, right? So you got like a 1-lane road with an on-ramp. Then it expands to 2. So now the on-ramp is literally like 30 feet long, and you really got to like floor it. If you don't have a fast car, it takes a certain driving style. You have to make sure it's clear for like a quarter mile before you enter the highway, because the acceleration lane is so tiny. It's more challenging than I think a lot of other states.
They need to tear all that up and just get a fresh start. Speaking of fresh starts, it's time for a fresh start. Start the year off on the right foot and the right pants with the right jacket over the right shirt. Trunk Club is here to handle your wardrobe so you can focus on what matters. Trunk Club takes the hassle out of shopping by finding the